Welcome back to masteringinlogic.com's quick tips. No nonsense random tips that I think you might find useful. Maybe. In part 1 we created a pulse width modulation pad, and in this lesson we're going to finish the pad by adding some plugins and automating the track in different ways. If you've not seen part 1, I highly recommend you go check out that lesson first. So our pulse width modulation pad is sounding great, but if we compare it to my original pad, it still falls short of sounding close, and there's good reason. Before we get going, I want you to notice how the use of automation helps to thin the pad during the verse and even add some sound design elements to the mix, giving it structural and arrangement interest, serving both the chorus and verse sections. Let's remind ourselves of the track and listen to the processing. Okay, so as you can hear, the original pad that I created using the ES2 is much wider and edgier, and there's good reason. The channel strip has distortion, compression, and EQ, and the track is bussed to a stereo delay, tremolo, and stereo spread chain. It's the combination of these extra elements that add to the sound and, in my opinion, make the pad that much more interesting. Let's start by looking at the track channel chain. To add edge to the sound and break it up so it wasn't quite as clean, I loaded one of my favourite Logic X plugins, the Bit Crusher, and applied 7 dBs of drive, broke the sound up by reducing the resolution to 8 bits, applied a tiny bit of downsampling, and finally reduced the mix so the distortion blended back with the original sound. To keep the part as even as possible, I instantiated the compressor and applied enough to give around 5 dBs of gain reduction. I wanted the compressor to hold onto the part continuously, so reduce the threshold enough to constantly compress it. I also wanted to take advantage of the compressor's distortion stage, brightening the part with upper harmonics. Soft clip is the best choice here, so as to ensure the distortion is continuous and progressive as the pad gets louder and quieter. I usually always use soft clip when adding distortion to Logic's compressor. The attack and release is slow and medium. Again, this helps to hold on to the signal constantly. I could have sidechained the part to the kick drum, but personal preference here, I like the sustaining sound, which ultimately makes it feel bigger because, of course, we judge loudness over time. It's worth thinking about that for your own music. If you want something to feel loud, long sustaining notes, chords, pads, beats, whatever it is, can help achieve that. Not always, but it is a good rule of thumb. Finally, in my chain, I have Logic's channel EQ. Its setup is dead simple. A low cut filter removes the unwanted low end. Remember, the dirty bass covers the lows already. A small dip around 200 helps to clean the part up and ensure the mix doesn't become cluttered. The key element of the EQ is I used it to create both movement and sound design by automating the low cut and Q factors. Remember earlier on I said about the difference in sound between the chorus and the verse. So I did this for 2 reasons. First, automating the low cut from the chorus part to the verse allows me to control how full and thin the part is throughout the music. This gives more creative control over the pad and helps to keep the music interesting throughout the arrangement. At least that's the idea. Second, I made use of automating the low cut and Q factor, sweeping up through the frequency range to create a pad sweep at the end of the verse part. This helps give more interest to the pad, as well as create a sound design element that functions as a transition from the verse back to the chorus. Pretty useful. Using EQ to both tailor the part for the mix and adding sound design with automation is a great way to get more out of Logic's humble EQ. If you're not sure how to automate a plugin, it's dead easy. There's many ways to do it, but I often like to simply hit the A key, which activates automation, and then click on the dialog in the track channel. From there, I simply select channel EQ and then scroll down to the low cut Q factor, for example, and then draw in the automation with the mouse on the track. Easy. Let's check out how the channel processing affects the pad part. Okay, so once the channel was sounding good, it was time to bust the pad to the effects chain to add that final touch to the sound. I wanted the pad to have sustain, width, and movement, all affecting and interacting with each other. So on the same bus strip, I loaded the stereo delay, tremolo, and stereo spread. I used the stereo delay over the tape delay because it adds both space and width. To find the sound I wanted, I first went through the presets and then from there tailored the delay to my liking. The 8th note dotted preset seemed to work okay, but I reduced the low and high cut so the delay was only audible from 2 to 4K. This means the delay wouldn't fill up the mix or get in the way of the pad part. I further tweaked the delay times, feedback and crossfeed so the delay worked with the music and sustained as I wanted it to. Notice though the crossfeed is set to 0, ensuring the delays don't cross over to the other side of the mix. In your own music, it's important to ask yourself, how does this sound with the music? And what is it I want the delay to do? Once you've answered those questions, you'll have a delay part that will fit much better with your mix. So, to really give my delays movement and separate them from the actual pad sound, I use Logic's tremolo to flutter back and forth across the stereo field using 16th notes. This was further enhanced by the stereo spread, pushing the upper frequencies of the pad's delays further out to the sides. This makes the pad much more animated in the music, and of course, the bus responds to all the automation changes as well. Let's take a listen to how all this sounds just from the bus, and then with the original pad, then with the whole mix. As you can hear, the bus part is a big part of the final sound and really brings the pad to life. On its own, the pulse width modulation pad works well, but coupled with the bit crusher, compression, automation, EQ, stereo delay running into the tremolo and spread, make for a much more animated, bigger and more interesting sounding pad. The other thing is, it's a great way to spend your time playing around with and inventing new chains to make up new and exciting sounds that are most importantly unique to you. Try it yourself, perhaps using these videos as a starting point for coming up with something far more creative than what I've demonstrated here. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please do subscribe and check out my site www.masteringinlogic.com, where I teach 6 hours worth of packed professional audio mastering tutorials, helping you create better sounding music. You can sign up for my mailing list at the site. Happy pad making, mixing, and mastering. Cheers!